Mrs. Brennan stood at the whiteboard, her neat cursive spelling words lined up perfectly as 23 students copied them into their notebooks. But something was wrong, very wrong. Mrs. Adelaide Brennan had been teaching for 17 years, and in all that time, she had developed an instinct for noticing when something was off with her students. Right now, every alarm bell in her head was ringing as she watched 10-year-old Elsie Crawford standing awkwardly beside her desk, her pencil gripped so tightly her knuckles had turned white. "Elsie, sweetheart," Mrs. Brennan said gently, pausing mid-word on the board, "you can sit down to write. You'll be much more comfortable." Elsie's head snapped up, her hazel eyes widening with something that looked almost like panic. "I'd rather stand, Mrs. Brennan. I like it better this way." Mrs. Brennan tilted her head, studying the girl carefully. Elsie Crawford had always been one of her brightest students, eager to participate, always with her hand raised first, always smiling. But today, that smile was gone. Today, Elsie's face was pale, her forehead creased with tension, and she kept shifting her weight from foot to foot in a way that suggested deep discomfort. "Are you sure, honey? We've been working for almost an hour. Your legs must be getting tired." "I'm fine," Elsie insisted, but her voice wavered slightly. "Really, Mrs. Brennan, standing helps me concentrate better." Mrs. Brennan watched as Elsie bent carefully over her notebook, moving with a slowness that seemed deliberate, controlled, as if every motion had to be calculated to avoid pain. The girl's left hand kept drifting to her lower back, pressing against it briefly before returning to hold the edge of her desk. This wasn't normal. Elsie had walked into class that morning and hadn't sat down once. Not during roll call, not during the morning announcements, not during their reading of the daily schedule. For over an hour now, she had remained standing while every other student sat comfortably at their desks. "All right," Mrs. Brennan said slowly, her concern deepening. "But if you change your mind, your chair is right there." "Yes, ma'am," Elsie replied quietly, already looking back down at her work. Mrs. Brennan returned her attention to the board, but her mind was no longer on spelling words. She kept glancing back at Elsie, watching the way the girl moved, or rather, the way she tried not to move. Every shift of weight seemed painful. Every time she leaned forward to write, she did so with extreme caution, like someone afraid of triggering some hidden agony. The other students had begun to notice too. "Why is Elsie being weird?" whispered Cody, a freckled boy with sandy blonde hair, to his neighbor. "Maybe she got in trouble and has to stand," another student suggested. Mrs. Brennan hushed them with a gentle reminder to focus on their work, but internally, she was building a timeline in her mind. Yesterday, Monday, Elsie had been fine. She'd sat normally, participated enthusiastically in their science lesson, laughed during recess. But this morning, everything had changed. An hour later, during reading time, the situation grew even more concerning. Mrs. Brennan had the class gather on the reading rug, a large, colorful carpet at the front of the room, where students typically sat cross-legged while she read aloud. 22 children settled onto the rug, wiggling into comfortable positions, but Elsie stood at the edge of the group, holding her book, her body rigid. "Elsie," Mrs. Brennan called softly, "come sit with us, sweetheart." "I can follow along standing up," Elsie said quickly. Too quickly. "I can see the pictures better from here." Mrs. Brennan felt her chest tighten with worry. This wasn't a preference. This wasn't a child being quirky or difficult. This was a child in distress, trying desperately to hide it. "Everyone else, continue reading silently for a moment," Mrs. Brennan instructed, standing up and walking over to where Elsie stood. She crouched down slightly to be at eye level with the girl. "Elsie, I need you to tell me the truth. Are you hurt?" Elsie's lips pressed together in a thin line. For several seconds, she said nothing. Then, barely above a whisper, "A little." "A little hurt? Where?" "My back," Elsie admitted, her eyes beginning to glisten with unshed tears. "It hurts when I try to sit down." Mrs. Brennan kept her voice calm and gentle. "How long has it been hurting?" "Since yesterday. After school." Elsie's voice cracked slightly. "It got worse overnight. This morning, I tried to sit at breakfast, and I couldn't. It hurt too much." "Did you tell your aunt and uncle about this?" At the mention of her aunt and uncle, Elsie's entire body seemed to tense even more. She shook her head quickly, her mousy brown hair swaying with the motion. "No, I couldn't tell them." "Why not, honey? If you're hurt, they need to know so they can help you." "I just couldn't," Elsie whispered, and now tears were sliding down her cheeks. "Please don't call them," Mrs. Brennan, please." Mrs. Brennan felt a cold sensation creeping through her veins. In her 17 years of teaching, she had taken multiple training courses on recognizing signs of child abuse and neglect. She knew the red flags: unexplained injuries, reluctance to go home, fear of specific adults, keeping secrets. And right now, looking at this crying 10-year-old who refused to sit down and was begging her not to contact her guardians, every single red flag was waving frantically. "Elsie," Mrs. Brennan said carefully, "did someone hurt your back? Did someone hit you or push you?" Elsie's tears flowed faster now. "Not exactly. It's complicated." "Can you explain it to me?" I can't. It's supposed to be a secret. Uncle Vance made me promise not to tell anyone." Those words made Mrs. Brennan's blood run cold. Uncle Vance made me promise not to tell anyone. Elsie lived with her aunt and uncle, Marla and Vance Holloway. Her parents had died in a car accident 3 years ago when Elsie was 7, and the Holloways, her mother's sister and brother-in-law, had taken her in. By all accounts, they were good people. Vance Holloway was a mechanic who owned his own shop. Marla Holloway worked as a nurse at the local hospital. They attended parent-teacher conferences, volunteered at school events, seemed devoted to Elsie. But abusers often seem like good people on the surface. Mrs. Brennan had learned that painful truth over the years. "Elsie," she said softly, kneeling fully now so they were eye to eye. "Sometimes secrets aren't meant to be kept. If someone is hurting you, even if they told you not to tell, you need to tell a trusted adult. That's what I'm here for, to keep you safe." "But Uncle Vance will be so upset," Elsie sobbed. "Everything will be ruined. Aunt Marla doesn't know, and if she finds out, everything will fall apart." Mrs. Brennan felt her heart hammering against her ribcage. A secret from the aunt. An uncle making a child promise silence. A child in obvious physical pain, unable to sit. The picture forming in her mind was horrifying, but she had to stay calm. She had to handle this correctly. "Elsie, I'm going to need you to come with me to the principal's office. We're going to talk to Mrs. Donovan. She can help us figure out what to do." "No, please," Elsie cried, her voice rising enough that the other students on the reading rug were now openly staring. "Please don't make me tell. I promised Uncle Vance. I promised." Mrs. Brennan stood, her decision made. "Class, I need you to continue reading quietly. I'll be back in just a few minutes." She gently placed a hand on Elsie's shoulder, careful not to touch her back. "Come with me, sweetheart. You're not in any trouble. We just need to talk." The walk down the hallway to Principal Donovan's office felt like it took an eternity. Elsie walked slowly, each step measured and careful. "Mrs." Brennan noticed how the girl moved stiffly, like an elderly person with arthritis, not like a vibrant 10-year-old child. "Does it hurt to walk?" Mrs. Brennan asked gently. "Not as much as sitting," Elsie replied. "Walking is okay. It's just when I try to bend or sit that it gets really, really bad." They reached the administrative office, and Mrs. Brennan knocked on the door marked Principal Janet Donovan. A voice called out, "Come in." Principal Donovan looked up from her computer screen, her professional smile fading immediately when she saw Mrs. Brennan's serious expression and Elsie's tear-stained face. Janet Donovan was in her late 50s, a seasoned educator with kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses and gray hair pulled back in a neat bun. "What's wrong?" she asked, standing immediately. Mrs. Brennan closed the door behind them. She spoke in a low voice, but Elsie could still hear every word. "Janet, we have a serious situation. Elsie has been unable to sit down all morning due to severe back pain. When I asked her about it, she told me that her uncle is responsible and that he made her promise to keep it a secret." Principal Donovan's face went pale. She looked at Elsie with new eyes, eyes filled with concern and alarm. "Is this true, Elsie?" Elsie nodded miserably, fresh tears spilling down her cheeks. "And she's afraid to tell her aunt," Mrs. Brennan added. "She said if her aunt finds out, everything will be ruined." The two women exchanged a heavy, meaningful glance. They both knew what protocol demanded in situations like this. They both understood the gravity of what they might be uncovering. Principal Donovan came around her desk and knelt in front of Elsie. "Honey, you're safe here. Mrs. Brennan and I care about you very much, and we want to help. Can you tell us exactly what your uncle did that hurt your back?" "I can't," Elsie sobbed. "I promised him. He said it was really important that nobody know. He said it would ruin everything if anyone found out." "Did he tell you what would happen if you told?" Mrs. Brennan asked carefully. He said everyone would be upset. He said Aunt Marla would be so disappointed. He said all our hard work would be for nothing. Principal Donovan's jaw tightened. Hard work? What kind of work were you doing with your uncle? I can't say. That's part of the secret. Mrs. Brennan felt sick to her stomach. A child doing secret work with an adult male guardian? A child in pain? A child terrified to reveal what had happened? Every piece of information was making the situation look worse. Elsie, Principal Donovan said gently, "Where exactly does your back hurt? Can you show me?" Elsie carefully reached behind herself and touched her lower back, right above her hips. Here, and sometimes higher up, near my shoulder blades, but mostly here. She touched the lower area again. When did it start hurting? Yesterday afternoon. After school, Uncle Vance took me to his workshop like he always does. We were there for a long time, and my back started hurting, but I didn't want to stop because we were almost done with the project. What project? Mrs. Brennan asked quickly. Elsie's eyes went wide, realizing she'd said too much. I can't tell you. That's the secret part. Principal Donovan stood up and walked to her desk, picking up her phone. I'm calling your Aunt Marla. No, Elsie cried out. Please, you'll ruin everything. The surprise will be ruined. What surprise? Both women asked simultaneously. But Elsie clamped her mouth shut, shaking her head violently. Principal Donovan dialed the hospital where Marla Holloway worked. After being transferred twice, she finally reached her. Mrs. Holloway, this is Principal Donovan from Riverside Elementary. I'm calling about Elsie. Is she all right? Marla's voice came through clearly, filled with immediate concern. Did something happen? She's here in my office, and she's safe, but we're very concerned. Elsie has been experiencing severe back pain. She says she cannot sit down without terrible pain, and when we asked her about it, she told us that her husband, your husband Vance, is responsible. There was a long, shocked silence on the other end of the line. What? Marla finally said, her voice shaking. Vance is responsible? What does that mean? What is she talking about? That's what we're trying to understand, Mrs. Holloway. Elsie also mentioned that she and your husband have been spending time together in his workshop and that there's some kind of secret project she's not supposed to tell anyone about. Another pause. When Marla spoke again, her voice had changed, becoming harder, more frightened. His workshop? They've been going there after school, I know that. Vance said he was teaching her about mechanics, about fixing things. But a secret? What secret? Elsie won't tell us, Principal Donovan said. She says she made a promise to your husband. Mrs. Holloway, I think you should come to the school. Elsie needs to be examined by a doctor. We need to understand what's causing her pain. I'm leaving right now, Marla said, her voice cracking. I'm on my shift, but I don't care. I'm coming right now. Please, please, tell me my niece is safe. She's safe, Principal Donovan assured her. We're going to make sure of that. After hanging up, Principal Donovan looked at Mrs. Brennan with a grim expression. I need to call Child Protective Services. We have a mandatory reporting obligation. Mrs. Brennan nodded, even though her stomach churned at the thought. Making that call would set official wheels in motion. It would bring investigators, interviews, potentially criminal charges. But if Elsie was being abused, they had no choice. Elsie, Principal Donovan said, sitting down in the chair next to the crying girl. Your aunt is on her way. Until she gets here, why don't we go sit in the nurse's office? Nurse Chen has some very comfortable chairs. I can't sit, Elsie whispered. It hurts too much. Then you can stand there and Nurse Chen can look at your back. Would that be okay? Elsie nodded weakly. As they walked to the nurse's office, Mrs. Brennan stayed close to Elsie. Sweetheart, I know you're scared, and I know you think you're betraying your uncle by telling us, but you did the right thing. If someone hurts you, even accidentally, we need to know so we can make sure you're okay and that it doesn't happen again. But he didn't mean to hurt me, Elsie said quickly, her words tumbling out. Uncle Vance would never hurt me on purpose. He loves me. He's been so nice to me, especially since Mom and Dad died. He's been taking such good care of me. Mrs. Brennan felt tears prick her own eyes. This was the heartbreaking part of these situations. Children often defended their abusers because they loved them, because they depended on them, because they didn't understand that what was happening was wrong. Nurse Chen, a petite woman in her 40s, with kind eyes and gentle hands, listened as Principal Donovan explained the situation. Her expression grew more serious with each word. "Elsie," Nurse Chin said softly, "I'd like to take a look at your back if that's okay. I won't touch you without your permission. I just want to see if there's any visible bruising or injury." Elsie hesitated, then nodded. Nurse Chin had her stand facing away, then carefully lifted the back of Elsie's shirt. Mrs. Brennan and Principal Donovan both leaned in to see. There was nothing. No bruises, no marks, no welts, no cuts. Just normal, unblemished skin. Nurse Chin gently pressed along Elsie's spine. "Tell me if anything hurts, honey." When her fingers reached Elsie's lower back, the girl cried out, "There, right there. That hurts so bad." Nurse Chin's eyebrows drew together in concern. "There's definitely tenderness here. She's not making this up. Something is causing her significant pain." She gently pressed a bit higher. "And here? That hurts too, but not as much." Nurse Chin had Elsie try to bend forward. The girl could barely move. When she attempted to touch her toes, she couldn't get her hands past her knees before crying out in pain. "This is real," Nurse Chin said, looking at the principal and teacher. "She's genuinely injured. The lack of visible trauma suggests it's internal muscle strain, possibly nerve damage, or deep tissue injury." "How would someone get that kind of injury?" Mrs. Brennan asked. "Several ways," Nurse Chin replied carefully. "Impact trauma, repetitive strain, forced positioning." She trailed off, clearly not wanting to speculate about abuse in front of the child. Principal Donovan stepped out into the hallway and made the call she'd been dreading. "Child Protective Services? Yes, I need to make a report." 20 minutes later, Marla Holloway burst through the doors of Riverside Elementary like a woman possessed. Still in her nurse's scrubs, her brown hair disheveled, her face flushed from running, she looked wild with fear and confusion. "Where is she?" Marla demanded of the secretary in the front office. "Where's Elsie?" "Mrs. Holloway, Principal Donovan is expecting you. This way." Marla practically ran down the hallway, her sneakers squeaking on the polished floor. When she reached the nurse's office and saw Elsie standing there, tears still on her cheeks, Marla's face crumpled. "Baby," she breathed, rushing forward but stopping herself before embracing Elsie, afraid of hurting her. "What happened? Are you okay?" "I'm sorry, Aunt Marla," Elsie sobbed. "I'm so sorry. I ruined everything." "Ruined what? I don't understand." Marla looked at Principal Donovan and Mrs. Brennan with desperation in her eyes. "What is going on? You said Vance is responsible for her pain? What does that mean?" Principal Donovan gestured for Marla to step out into the hallway with her and Mrs. Brennan, leaving Elsie with Nurse Chin. Once the door was closed, Principal Donovan explained everything. Elsie's refusal to sit, her admission about Uncle Vance being responsible, the secret project in his workshop, her terror about Marla finding out. Marla's face went through a rapid series of emotions: confusion, shock, disbelief, anger, and finally, horror. "Are you telling me you think Vance hurt her?" Marla's voice was barely a whisper. "Are you saying you think my husband abused my niece?" "We're not making any accusations," Principal Donovan said carefully. "We're simply reporting what Elsie told us. We've contacted Child Protective Services, and they'll investigate." "Child Protective Services?" Marla swayed slightly, as if she might faint. "Oh my God, this can't be happening." "Mrs. Holloway," Mrs. Brennan said gently, "Elsie mentioned they've been working on some kind of project in your husband's workshop. Do you know anything about that?" "Yes," Marla said, confusion clear in her voice. "Vance has been teaching her about engines and tools. He owns a mechanic shop, and he thought it would be good for her to learn practical skills. They go there after school sometimes. I thought it was good for her, good for them to bond. Elsie's been through so much since losing her parents. Vance has been trying so hard to be a father figure to her." "Did you know about a secret project?" Principal Donovan asked. "A secret?" Marla looked genuinely bewildered. "No. What kind of secret?" "Elsie won't say. She says she promised your husband she wouldn't tell anyone." Marla's hand flew to her mouth. "Oh, God. You actually think Vance has been hurting her? You think he's been—" She couldn't even finish the sentence. "We don't know what to think," Principal Donovan said, honestly. "But we have a duty to report when a child is in pain and indicates an adult is responsible, especially when secrets are involved." Marla pulled her phone from her pocket with shaking hands. "I need to call him. I need to talk to Vance right now." "Mrs. Holloway, I'm not sure that's—" But Marla was already dialing. The phone rang once, twice, 3 times. Finally, Vance answered. Hey, hun, what's up? Aren't you at work? Vance! Marla's voice shook. I'm at Elsie's school. They called me because she's in pain, back pain. She can't sit down, Vance. And she told them, you're responsible. There was a shocked silence. Then Vance's voice came through, confused and worried. What? Her back hurts? Since when? She says since yesterday, since you took her to the workshop. The workshop? Understanding flooded Vance's voice. Oh no, Marla, it's not what you think. We were working on the… He stopped abruptly. Wait, is Elsie there? Can she hear me? No, I'm in the hallway. Listen to me carefully, Vance said urgently. Elsie and I have been building something. It's a surprise. That's why she hasn't said anything. But I never hurt her, Marla. I would never, ever hurt that little girl. You know that. Then why is her back in so much pain she can't sit down? Marla demanded, her voice breaking. Why won't she tell anyone what happened? Because we've been working long hours, and she's been sitting on… He stopped again. Marla, I need to come to the school. I need to explain. This is a misunderstanding. The principal has called Child Protective Services, Marla said, her voice barely above a whisper. They're investigating. They what? Vance's voice rose. They called CPS? Marla, you can't let them think I'm coming right now. Don't let them do anything until I get there. Vance, I don't know what to believe right now, Marla said, tears streaming down her face. My niece is in pain and she's scared and she's been keeping secrets and I don't know what's real anymore. I'm 10 minutes away, Vance said firmly. Don't let them take her anywhere. I'm coming. He hung up. Marla looked at Principal Donovan and Mrs. Brennan, her face a mask of anguish. He's coming here. He says it's a misunderstanding, that they were building something as a surprise. But how could building something hurt her this badly? We're going to find out, Principal Donovan said. But first, I think we need to take Elsie to the hospital. She needs to be examined by a doctor. We need x-rays to see what's causing this pain. Marla nodded numbly. Yes, we should do that. They returned to the nurse's office. Elsie looked up when her aunt entered, her eyes red and swollen from crying. I'm sorry, Aunt Marla, Elsie said again. I tried not to tell. I tried so hard to keep the secret. Marla knelt in front of her niece, careful not to touch her back. Baby, I need you to tell me the truth. Did Uncle Vance hurt you? Not on purpose, Elsie said quickly. He didn't mean for my back to hurt. We were just working so hard, and I wanted to finish the project. And I didn't tell him my back was starting to hurt because I didn't want to stop. What project? Marla asked desperately. What were you making? Elsie's lip trembled. I can't tell you. It's supposed to be a surprise. Uncle Vance said. I don't care what Uncle Vance said, Marla interrupted, her voice firm but not unkind. Right now, I need to know what happened. The surprise doesn't matter anymore, Elsie. Your health matters. Your safety matters. Please, tell me what you were doing. Elsie looked at the floor, fresh tears falling. We were building. She took a shuddering breath. We were rebuilding Mom's old car. The room went silent. What? Marla breathed. Mom's old Mustang, Elsie said, the words tumbling out now. The one that's been sitting in Uncle Vance's garage since the accident. The one you said you could never bear to look at. Uncle Vance said we could restore it as a surprise for you. He said it would make you happy to see it beautiful again instead of just sitting there broken and sad. We've been working on it every day after school for 2 months. Marla's hand flew to her mouth. Her late sister's car, the red 1967 Mustang that had been totaled in the crash that killed Elsie's parents. The car that Vance had towed to his shop because Marla couldn't bear to let strangers have it, but also couldn't bear to look at it. We were restoring it? Marla's voice was barely audible. Yes, Elsie said. Uncle Vance has been teaching me everything. How to take apart the engine, how to sand down rust, how to repaint. Yesterday we were working on the interior, replacing the seats. I had to sit on the garage floor for hours, reaching into the car, holding tools, helping Uncle Vance bolt things down. The floor is concrete and it's really hard. And I was sitting in weird positions trying to reach things, and my back started hurting, but I didn't want to stop because we were almost done. She looked up at her aunt with desperate eyes. I wanted it to be perfect for you, Aunt Marla. I wanted you to have Mom's car back, beautiful like it used to be. That's why I didn't say anything about my back. That's why I couldn't tell you what we were doing. It was supposed to be a surprise for your birthday next week." Marla sank into a chair, covering her face with her hands. Her shoulders shook with silent sobs. Mrs. Brennan and Principal Donovan looked at each other, realization dawning slowly. A restored car. Hours of work on a concrete garage floor. A child sitting in cramped positions, reaching into tight spaces. Muscle, strain, and inflammation from overexertion and poor posture. Not abuse, an act of love that had gone wrong. But the damage was already done. Before anyone could fully process this revelation, the school's front door burst open. Two figures entered simultaneously from opposite directions, creating chaos in the administrative office. From the main entrance, Vance Holloway, a tall man in his early 40s with work-stained hands and panic in his eyes. From the side entrance, Detective Sarah Martinez and social worker Gregory Paulson from Child Protective Services, their faces serious and professional. "Where's Elsie?" Vance demanded of the secretary. "Where's my niece?" Detective Martinez stepped forward immediately. "Mr. Holloway? Vance Holloway?" Vance turned, confusion crossing his face. "Yes? Who are you?" "I'm Detective Martinez, and this is Mr. Paulson from CPS. We need to speak with you about Elsie Crawford." "I need to see Elsie first," Vance said firmly. "There's been a terrible misunderstanding." "Mr. Holloway, I'm going to need you to come with us," Detective Martinez said, her hand moving to her belt where her badge was clipped. "We have a report of possible child abuse, and we need to ask you some questions." "Child abuse?" Vance's face went pale, then flushed with anger. "You think I abused Elsie? Are you insane? I would never hurt that child. She's like a daughter to me." "Sir, please calm down," the detective said. "Getting agitated won't help the situation." In the nurse's office down the hall, they could hear raised voices. Elsie's eyes went wide with fear. "That's Uncle Vance," she said. "He sounds mad. Is he mad at me?" "No, sweetheart," Marla said, trying to compose herself even as tears continued to stream down her face. "He's not mad at you. He's just confused and worried." Principal Donovan stepped into the hallway, with Mrs. Brennan right behind her. They saw the confrontation unfolding in the front office. "Detective Martinez," Principal Donovan called out, walking toward them. "I'm Principal Donovan. We spoke on the phone. There's been a development. I think you should hear what Elsie just told us before you proceed further." Detective Martinez looked at her sharply. "What kind of development?" "The kind that changes everything," Principal Donovan said. "Please, come to my office, all of you." 5 minutes later, they were all crammed into Principal Donovan's office. Vance and Marla Holloway, Detective Martinez, Social Worker Paulson, Principal Donovan, Mrs. Brennan, and Nurse Chen. Elsie sat painfully, carefully, in a cushioned chair, her small frame dwarfed by the adults surrounding her. "Elsie," Detective Martinez said gently, kneeling in front of the girl. "I'm Detective Martinez. I need to ask you some questions about your back pain. Is that okay?" Elsie nodded, her eyes darting nervously to Uncle Vance. "You told your teacher that your uncle is responsible for your back hurting. Can you explain what you meant by that?" "We were working on a car," Elsie said quietly. "Mom's old Mustang. We've been fixing it as a surprise for Aunt Marla. Yesterday, I was sitting on the garage floor for a really long time, in weird positions, helping Uncle Vance install the new seats. The floor was hard, and I had to bend and reach and hold heavy things, and my back started hurting. But it wasn't Uncle Vance's fault. He kept asking if I needed brakes. I was the one who said no, because I wanted to finish." Detective Martinez looked at Vance. "You had her doing manual labor? On concrete? For hours?" "I had her helping me with a restoration project," Vance said, his voice tight with emotion. "She wanted to learn. She wanted to be part of rebuilding her mother's car. I taught her how to use tools safely. I supervised everything. I never asked her to do anything dangerous." "But you didn't monitor whether she was developing a physical injury?" Social worker Paulson interjected. "She never told me she was hurting." Vance's voice cracked. "If she had said her back hurt, I would have stopped immediately. We would have taken breaks. I would have—" His voice broke completely. "I would have brought her to a doctor. I never would have let her suffer." "He didn't know," Elsie said firmly, her small voice cutting through the tension. "I didn't tell him because I didn't want to stop working. This is my fault, not his." Marla spoke up, her voice hoarse from crying. "Vance, you were rebuilding Claire's Mustang?" Vance looked at his wife, his eyes glistening with unshed tears. For your birthday, Elsie and I we thought it would help you heal, to have your sister's car back, not broken and abandoned, but restored, beautiful again. We wanted to give you that." The silence in the room was deafening. Detective Martinez exchanged a long look with social worker Paulson. This wasn't the scenario they'd expected to walk into. There was no malicious abuse here, no intentional harm. Just a well-meaning uncle and a determined little girl who'd pushed herself too hard while working on a labor of love. "Mr. Holloway," Detective Martinez said slowly, "I need to understand the full scope of this project. How many hours per day was Elsie working in your garage?" "Usually about 2 hours after school," Vance said. "Sometimes 3 on days when we had more time. Never on school nights past 7. I always made sure she did her homework first." "And the work she was doing, was it age appropriate?" "I thought so," Vance said defensively. "I wasn't having her operate power tools unsupervised or lift anything too heavy. She was helping me holding parts, passing tools, learning about engines. The work she did yesterday, helping with the seats, that was probably the most physically demanding task. But I honestly didn't realize she was in an awkward position for so long. I was focused on the technical work, and she seemed fine. She was talking and laughing the whole time." Elsie nodded vigorously. "I was fine. I was having fun. My back didn't start hurting until we were almost done, and then it hurt more at dinner, and even more when I tried to sleep. This morning, it was really bad, but I thought it would get better." Nurse Chen spoke up. "Based on my examination and what Elsie has described, this is consistent with severe muscle strain and inflammation from prolonged sitting on a hard surface in poor ergonomic positions. It's painful but not permanent. With rest, anti-inflammatory medication, and proper care, she should recover fully within a week or 2. "So this wasn't abuse," Marla said, looking at the detective and social worker. "This was an accident, a child pushing herself too hard on a project she cared about, and an adult who didn't realize she was getting hurt." Social worker Paulson made notes on his tablet. "Mrs. Holloway, that may be the case, but we still need to complete our investigation. When a report is made, we have protocols to follow." "Investigation?" Vance's voice rose again. "You're still going to investigate me, even after hearing all of this?" "Standard procedure, sir," Detective Martinez said, though her tone had softened considerably. "We need to visit your home, see this garage workshop, verify the conditions. We need to interview Elsie separately to ensure she's not being coached or coerced into protecting you. These are standard steps." "I'm not protecting him," Elsie cried out. "Why won't anyone believe me? Uncle Vance didn't do anything wrong. I'm the one who messed up. I'm the one who didn't say my back hurt." Marla moved to comfort her niece, wrapping her arms carefully around the girl's shoulders. "Shh, baby. Nobody thinks you messed up. You were being brave and working hard. Sometimes our bodies just can't keep up with how hard our hearts want to work." Mrs. Brennan, who had been quiet for several minutes, finally spoke. "Detective Martinez, Mr. Paulson, I was the one who initially raised the alarm about Elsie's condition. I want to state for the record that I genuinely believed I was acting in her best interest. The signs I observed, her refusal to sit, her pain, her reluctance to reveal what was happening, her statement about a secret her uncle made her keep, all of those aligned with warning signs we're trained to recognize. I don't regret making the report, because child safety must always come first. But I want to acknowledge that this situation appears to be very different from what I initially feared." "I appreciate your honesty, Mrs. Brennan," Detective Martinez said, "and you did the right thing by reporting. In situations like these, it's always better to be overly cautious than to miss a genuine case of abuse. The fact that this turned out to be a misunderstanding doesn't mean you were wrong to be concerned." She turned back to Vance. "Mr. Holloway, here's what's going to happen. We're going to schedule a home visit within the next 48 hours. We're going to inspect your garage and your home. We're going to conduct separate interviews with you, Mrs. Holloway, and Elsie. Based on all of that, we'll make a determination about whether any further action is needed. For now, Elsie should be taken to a hospital for a full medical evaluation to document her injury and ensure there's no serious damage." "We're taking her to Providence Medical Center right now," Marla said firmly. "Good. Make sure you get copies of all medical records and imaging results. We'll need those for our file." Detective Martinez handed Marla a business card. "My contact information. If you have any questions or concerns, call me directly." As the detective and social worker prepared to leave, Vance finally moved toward Elsie. He approached slowly, as if afraid she might flinch away from him. When he knelt in front of her, tears were openly streaming down his face. "Elsie, sweetheart, I am so sorry. I should have been paying better attention. I should have made you take more breaks. I should have put padding on that garage floor. I should have—" "It's not your fault, Uncle Vance," Elsie interrupted, her own tears flowing. "I should have told you I was hurting. I just wanted to finish Mom's car so badly. I wanted Aunt Marla to have it." Vance pulled her into a gentle hug, careful of her back. "You have the biggest heart of any kid I've ever known, but your health is more important than any surprise, okay? Promise me that from now on, if something hurts, you'll tell me immediately. Deal?" "Deal," Elsie whispered into his shoulder. Watching this exchange, everyone in the room felt the emotional weight of what had almost happened. A loving family had nearly been torn apart by a misunderstanding. A devoted uncle had nearly been labeled an abuser. A traumatized child had nearly been put through even more trauma. But even as the immediate crisis seemed to be resolving, there was a palpable sense that something was still off. The adults in the room couldn't quite shake the feeling that there was more to this story. And they were right. Providence Medical Center's Pediatric Emergency Department was busy that afternoon. Marla, Vance, and Elsie sat in a private examination room, waiting for the doctor. Principal Donovan and Mrs. Brennan had accompanied them, wanting to ensure they had all the information needed for their reports. Detective Martinez had also decided to stay, saying it was important to have a complete medical assessment for the CPS file. Dr. Reina Torres entered the room, a petite woman in her 50s with sharp, intelligent eyes and a warm smile. She'd been briefed on the situation by Nurse Chen, who had called ahead. "Hello, Elsie," Dr. Torres said gently. "I hear you've been having some back pain. Let's figure out what's going on, shall we?" She conducted a thorough examination, having Elsie stand, bend, twist, and move in various ways. Each movement elicited winces and gasps of pain from the girl. "Doctor?" Torres palpated Elsie's back muscles, noting areas of particular tenderness. "I'm going to order some x-rays and possibly an MRI," Dr. Torres said. "I want to make sure there's no structural damage, no compressed discs, no fractures, nothing serious. From what I can feel, this seems like severe muscle strain and inflammation, but I want to be absolutely certain." 45 minutes later, they had the results. Dr. Torres pulled up the images on a large screen in the examination room. "Good news first," she said. "There's no fracture, no disc herniation, no spinal damage. Elsie's bones and spine are perfectly healthy." Everyone breathed a collective sigh of relief. However, Dr. Torres continued, her tone becoming more serious. "There is significant inflammation in the muscles of her lower back, particularly the erector spinae and latissimus dorsi muscles. This kind of inflammation is typically caused by sustained poor posture, repetitive strain, or prolonged pressure." She zoomed in on one particular area of the X-ray. "See here? This shadowing indicates deep tissue inflammation. This didn't happen from a few hours of work. This kind of injury develops over an extended period, days, possibly weeks." Vance's face palled. "Weeks? But we've been working on the car for 2 months. Are you saying she's been getting injured this whole time?" "Possibly," Dr. Torres said. "The human body is remarkably resilient, but it can also mask developing injuries through adaptation. Elsie might have been experiencing minor discomfort for a while, which her body was compensating for until yesterday when something pushed it over the threshold and the inflammation became acute." She turned to Elsie. "Sweetie, has your back been bothering you at all before yesterday? Even just a little bit?" Elsie bit her lip, thinking, "Sometimes it would feel a little sore after we worked in the garage, like when my legs get sore after gym class, but I didn't think it was a big deal. It always felt better by the next morning." "Except it wasn't actually getting better," Dr. Torres explained. "It was just settling down enough that you didn't notice it, but the damage was accumulating. Yesterday, when you spent hours in those awkward positions on the concrete floor, it was the final straw. All that accumulated damage manifested as acute inflammation and pain." Marla put her face in her hands. "Oh, Elsie, you've been hurting for weeks and didn't tell us?" "I didn't know I was getting hurt," Elsie said defensively. "It just felt like regular tired muscle soreness, like after swimming or playing tag. I didn't know it was bad." Dr. Torres sat down in a chair across from them. "Here's what concerns me most, though. I need to ask some questions, and I need everyone to answer honestly. Elsie, when you were working in the garage, were you taking regular breaks? Getting up and stretching? Changing positions? Uncle Vance would tell me to take breaks, Elsie said, but sometimes I didn't want to. I wanted to keep working. Mr. Holloway, were you supervising her the entire time she was in the garage? Vance nodded. Yes, I was right there with her, working on the car. And you never noticed she was in pain or moving stiffly? Vance's expression grew troubled. She did mention a few times that her back felt tight. I told her to stretch. I thought it was just from sitting. I didn't realize. His voice trailed off. Dr. Torres's expression became even more serious. Mr. Holloway, I need to be direct with you. Having a 10-year-old child perform manual labor for 2 to 3 hours a day, even supervised, even with good intentions, is problematic. Children's bodies are still developing. Their muscles and skeletal systems aren't designed for sustained physical work, especially not in positions that require poor ergonomics. I wasn't having her do hard labor, Vance protested. She was helping me, learning. I understand your intentions, Dr. Torres interrupted gently but firmly. But intention doesn't change the physical reality. This child has a serious injury that developed over weeks of repetitive strain. That's a red flag, Mr. Holloway, not necessarily of abuse, but of inadequate supervision and judgment. Detective Martinez, who had been watching quietly from the corner, stepped forward. Dr. Torres, in your medical opinion, could this injury have been prevented? Absolutely, Dr. Torres said without hesitation. If Elsie had been working in more appropriate conditions, padded surfaces instead of concrete, proper seating with lumbar support, enforced breaks every 30 minutes, limited work sessions to no more than an hour at a time, this injury likely wouldn't have happened. The fact that a child was allowed to develop this level of damage over an extended period raises questions about the adequacy of adult supervision. Vance looked stricken. Marla's face had gone pale. Elsie looked confused and frightened. Are you saying Uncle Vance did something wrong? Elsie asked, her voice small. I'm saying that adults have a responsibility to protect children, even from themselves, Dr. Torres said gently. You wanted to keep working because you loved the project. That's understandable. But your uncle should have been more cautious, should have set stricter limits, should have recognized the signs that you were developing an injury. Detective Martinez pulled out her phone. I need to make a call. Excuse me. She stepped out of the room. In the hallway, she called social worker Paulson. Greg, we have a complication. The doctor is saying the injury developed over weeks, not just yesterday, and she's questioning whether adequate supervision was provided. This isn't looking like a simple accident anymore. This is starting to look like potential negligence. Inside the examination room, Marla turned to her husband, her expression a mixture of heartbreak and anger. Vance, how did you not notice? How did you not see that she was getting hurt? I thought I was being careful, Vance said, his voice breaking. I thought I was teaching her, bonding with her. I thought I was doing something good for both of you, for our whole family. You were, Elsie insisted, tears streaming down her face. Uncle Vance, you were. This is all my fault. I'm the one who didn't tell you how much it hurt. I'm the one who kept saying I was fine. Please, don't blame him, please. Mrs. Brennan, who had been silent, finally spoke. Dr. Torres, I have a question. You said this injury developed over weeks. Is there any possibility that Elsie had a pre-existing condition or vulnerability that made her more susceptible to this kind of injury? Dr. Torres considered this. That's a good question. Let me check something. She pulled up Elsie's medical records on the computer. After scrolling through several screens, she paused. Interesting. It looks like Elsie was diagnosed with mild scoliosis 2 years ago. Has that been monitored? Marla's eyes widened. Oh my God. I completely forgot about that. After my sister died, there was so much chaos, so many appointments and paperwork, and we had a follow-up scheduled with an orthopedist, but I missed it. I meant to reschedule, but I never did. Scoliosis can make someone more susceptible to back strain and injury, Dr. Torres said. If Elsie's spine has even a slight curve, that puts uneven stress on the supporting muscles. When combined with poor posture and sustained physical work, it would accelerate the development of inflammation and strain. She turned to Vance. Did you know about her scoliosis? Vance shook his head, looking devastated. No, Marla, you never told me. I forgot, Marla whispered. With everything that happened, with trying to adjust to having Elsie live with us, With all the grief and stress, it slipped my mind. Oh God, this is my fault too. Detective Martinez returned to the room. Dr. Torres, I'm going to need copies of all of Elsie's medical records, including records from before she came to live with the Holloways. I'll need your full medical report documenting this injury, and I'll need a written statement regarding your assessment of whether proper care and supervision was provided. You're still investigating? Marla asked, her voice rising with panic. Even though this was an accident? Even though Vance didn't know about her scoliosis? Mrs. Holloway, there's a child with a serious injury that developed over an extended period while in your care, Detective Martinez said firmly but not unkindly. Whether it was intentional abuse, negligence, or simply a tragic accident, that determination has to be made through a complete investigation. I'm sorry, but this process has to continue. Vance stood up abruptly. I need some air. He walked out of the room, his shoulders shaking. Marla looked torn between following her husband and staying with her niece. She chose Elsie, pulling the girl into her arms. I'm so sorry, baby, Marla whispered. I should have taken better care of you. I should have remembered about your back condition. I should have made sure you had that follow-up appointment. It's okay, Aunt Marla, Elsie said, but her voice was hollow now, the weight of what was happening finally starting to sink in. Nobody meant for any of this to happen. Dr. Torres prepared discharge papers. Elsie needs complete rest for the next week. No physical exertion, no bending or lifting. I'm prescribing anti-inflammatory medication and muscle relaxants. She should use heating pads for comfort. I want to see her back here in 1 week for a follow-up, and I'm also referring her to a pediatric orthopedist to address the scoliosis. That needs to be monitored and possibly treated. She looked at Marla seriously. Mrs. Holloway, I'm required to make a report to Child Protective Services about my findings. That's not a judgment on you or your husband. It's just protocol when a child's injury raises questions. Another report, Marla said dully. So now we'll have 2 investigations? They'll likely be combined into one comprehensive investigation, Detective Martinez said. Mr. Paulson and I will coordinate. We'll visit your home tomorrow morning at 9. Both you and your husband need to be present. As they prepared to leave the hospital, Principal Donovan touched Marla's arm gently. Mrs. Holloway, I want you to know that Riverside Elementary will support Elsie in any way she needs. If she needs accommodations while she's recovering, if she needs counseling, anything at all, please let us know. Thank you, Marla said quietly. They left the hospital in a daze. The parking lot was bathed in the golden light of late afternoon. Vance was standing by their car, his arms crossed over his chest, staring at nothing. When Marla and Elsie approached, he looked at them with eyes red from crying. I never meant to hurt you, he said to Elsie. You have to believe me. I know, Uncle Vance, Elsie said. I believe you. But as they drove home in heavy silence, one thought consumed everyone in that car. What would happen next? Would CPS take Elsie away? Would Vance face charges? Would their family survive this? And in the back seat, Elsie wondered about the restored Mustang sitting in Uncle Vance's garage, a symbol of love and healing that had somehow become the center of a nightmare. What none of them knew yet was that the investigation was about to uncover something that would change everything they thought they understood about Elsie's injury. The real truth was still hidden, waiting to be discovered. And when it finally came to light, it would shake them all to their core. The next morning arrived too quickly. Marla had barely slept, lying awake beside Vance in their bedroom, both of them staring at the ceiling, not talking. Downstairs, Elsie slept fitfully on the couch, finding it less painful than lying flat in her bed. At precisely 9 o'clock, Detective Martinez and social worker Gregory Paulson arrived at the Holloway residence, a modest ranch-style home in a quiet suburban neighborhood. They were accompanied by another person, Dr. Patricia Kendrick, a child forensic specialist who examined cases where abuse or neglect was suspected. Vance answered the door, his face drawn and exhausted. Come in. The investigators entered, their eyes immediately sweeping the space with professional assessment. The home was clean, well-maintained. Family photos covered the walls, showing happier times. Vance and Marla on their wedding day, Elsie with her parents before the accident, more recent photos of Elsie with her aunt and uncle at birthday parties, school events, holidays. Where's Elsie? Dr. Kendrick asked. Sleeping on the couch, Marla said, emerging from the kitchen. The muscle relaxants make her drowsy. I'd like to speak with her privately, Dr. Kendrick said. Standard protocol. We need to ensure she feels safe speaking freely without adults present who might influence her responses. Marla nodded, her throat tight. She gently woke Elsie, explaining that a doctor needed to talk to her. Elsie, groggy and disoriented, was led to her bedroom. Dr. Kendrick closed the door, leaving the adults in the living room with Detective Martinez and social worker Paulson. "We need to see the garage where Elsie was working," Detective Martinez said. "And we'll need to inspect Elsie's living space, her bedroom, bathroom, the whole house." For the next hour, the investigators methodically examined every room. They took photographs, made notes, asked questions. Marla and Vance followed them around, answering everything honestly, feeling like criminals in their own home. When they finally reached the detached garage behind the house, Vance unlocked the door with shaking hands. Inside, the garage was organized chaos. Tools hung neatly on pegboards. Shelves held carefully labeled parts and supplies. Work lights illuminated the space. And in the center, covered with a protective tarp, sat the restored Mustang. Vance pulled off the tarp. The car was breathtaking. The cherry red paint gleamed under the work lights. The chrome shone. New leather seats were visible through the windows. The engine, though not yet running, looked pristine. "This is what you and Elsie were working on?" Detective Martinez asked, walking slowly around the vehicle. "Yes," Vance said quietly. "We've put over 200 hours into this restoration. Elsie helped with almost all of it. She learned how to gap spark plugs, rebuild a carburetor, replace brake lines. She was so proud of herself, so excited to show Marla." Social worker Paulson pointed to a corner of the garage where a wooden stool sat next to a rolling mechanic's creeper. "Is this where Elsie was sitting when she worked?" "Sometimes the stool, sometimes the creeper, sometimes she'd sit on the floor," Vance admitted, "depending on what part of the car we were working on." Detective Martinez knelt down, examining the concrete floor. It was hard, unforgiving, stained with decades of oil and work. She pulled out a measuring tape and began documenting the workspace dimensions, the height of the work surfaces, the distance between tools and the car. "Mr. Holloway, did you provide any ergonomic accommodations for Elsie? Cushions, padded mats, back support?" Vance's silence was answer enough. "I didn't think about it," he finally said, his voice barely audible. "I was so focused on teaching her the mechanical work, on making the car perfect, that I didn't think about her comfort. I thought kids were resilient. I thought she'd speak up if something was wrong." "Children often don't recognize when they're being injured," Detective Martinez said. "They push through pain because they want to please adults, because they're invested in a project, because they don't understand the long-term consequences. That's why adults have to be vigilant." Inside the house, Dr. Kendrick was conducting her interview with Elsie. The child sat carefully on her bed, surrounded by stuffed animals and books, her face earnest as she answered questions. "Elsie, I want you to know that you're not in trouble," Dr. Kendrick said gently. "I'm here to make sure you're safe and healthy. Can you tell me about living with your aunt and uncle? Do you feel safe here?" "Yes," Elsie said immediately. "They love me. They take care of me. After my parents died, I was so scared and sad. But Aunt Marla and Uncle Vance made me feel like I still had a family." "Tell me about the work you did in the garage. Did Uncle Vance ever make you feel like you had to work? Like you couldn't say no?" "No," Elsie shook her head firmly. "I wanted to work on the car. It was my idea to surprise Aunt Marla. Uncle Vance actually tried to stop me a few times when he thought I was getting tired, but I kept telling him I was fine." "Why didn't you tell him when your back started hurting?" Elsie's eyes filled with tears. "Because I was afraid he'd make me stop, and I wanted to finish the car so badly. I wanted to give Aunt Marla something beautiful from her sister, something that would make her smile instead of cry." Dr. Kendrick made notes. "Did Uncle Vance ever touch you in ways that made you uncomfortable? Ever ask you to keep secrets about things other than the car?" "No." Elsie looked shocked. "Never. Uncle Vance is good. He's not bad. Why does everyone think he did something wrong?" "Because you got hurt, sweetheart, and adults are responsible for keeping children safe, even when children think they're fine." Back in the garage, Detective Martinez was photographing everything when something caught her eye. On a high shelf, partially hidden behind a box of car parts, was a spiral notebook. She reached up and pulled it down. "What's this?" she asked. Vance glanced over. "Oh, that's Elsie's project journal. I had her keep notes about what we did each day. I thought it would be good for her to document the restoration process. Detective Martinez opened the notebook. Page after page was filled with Elsie's neat, childish handwriting. Day 23. Today we removed the old radiator. Uncle Vance showed me how to drain the coolant safely. My hands got really dirty. We worked for 3 hours. My back felt a little sore after, but I stretched like Uncle Vance told me to. Day 31. We started sanding the body today. Uncle Vance gave me my own sandpaper and showed me how to work in circular motions. We worked for 4 hours. I didn't want to stop even when Uncle Vance said we should take a break. My back hurt a little bit, but I didn't tell him because we were making such good progress. Day 45. Today we painted. Uncle Vance let me help spray the clear coat. It was so cool. We had to wear masks so we wouldn't breathe the fumes. We worked for 5 hours because the paint needed multiple coats. My back was really sore tonight, but tomorrow is Saturday, so I can rest. Detective Martinez flipped through more pages, her expression growing increasingly troubled. Nearly every entry mentioned Elsie's back hurting. Every single one also mentioned her choice not to tell Vance, her desire to keep working, her excitement about the project. Mr. Holloway, Detective Martinez said slowly, "Did you read this journal?" "A few times," Vance admitted. "Mostly, I just made sure she was keeping up with it." "Why?" "Because if you had read it carefully, you would have seen that Elsie documented her pain dozens of times. She wrote about her back hurting, about being sore, about pushing through discomfort. This is evidence that the injury was developing over a long period and that you failed to recognize it even though the warning signs were documented." Vance took the notebook with shaking hands, flipping through the pages, seeing for the first time what he had missed. His face crumpled. "Oh, God," he whispered. "Oh, God, she wrote about it. She wrote about hurting, and I never read it closely enough. I failed her. I completely failed her." Marla, reading over his shoulder, pressed her hand to her mouth. Tears streamed down her face. Social worker Paulson was documenting everything with his tablet camera. This is significant evidence. It demonstrates a pattern of inadequate supervision and failure to recognize a developing injury. "But it also shows that Elsie was deliberately hiding the extent of her pain," Marla said desperately. "Look at these entries. She specifically says she didn't tell him. She chose not to speak up." "She's a child," Detective Martinez said firmly. "Children don't have the judgment to recognize when they need to stop. Adults do. That's the entire point of adult supervision." Just then, Dr. Kendrick emerged from the house with Elsie. The child looked pale and exhausted. "I've completed my interview," Dr. Kendrick said. "Elsie has been very forthcoming. I have no concerns about intentional abuse. However, I do have significant concerns about inadequate supervision and failure to provide appropriate working conditions for a child." She approached Vance, her expression serious but not unkind. "Mr. Holloway, I believe you love Elsie very much. I believe your intentions were good, but good intentions don't prevent harm. You allowed a 10-year-old child with an unmonitored spinal condition to engage in sustained physical labor in poor ergonomic conditions for months. You failed to enforce adequate breaks or provide proper equipment. And even when she documented her pain in writing, you didn't notice. That's negligence, even if it was unintentional." Vance looked at Elsie, his eyes filled with anguish. "I'm so sorry, sweetheart. I'm so sorry." Elsie ran to him, wrapping her arms around his waist despite the pain it caused her back. "Please don't take me away from them," she begged Dr. Kendrick. "Please, this is my home. They're my family. I don't want to leave. I don't want to go into foster care. Please." The desperation in her voice cut through everyone present. Dr. Kendrick and Detective Martinez stepped away with social worker Paulson for a private conference. They spoke in low tones for several minutes while the Holloway family clung to each other in the garage, all three of them crying. Finally, the investigators returned. "Here's our assessment," Detective Martinez said. "This case doesn't rise to the level of criminal child abuse. There's no evidence of intentional harm or malicious intent. However, it does constitute negligence, specifically failure to provide adequate supervision and appropriate working conditions for a minor child." She looked at social worker Paulson, who nodded and continued. "We're recommending that Elsie remain in your care, but with conditions. First, both of you will be required to attend parenting classes focused on child safety and recognizing developmental limitations. Second, Elsie will need regular check-ins with a social worker for the next 6 months. Third, any future projects or activities involving sustained physical work will require pre-approval from CPS. Fourth, you must ensure all of Elsie's medical needs are addressed, including the scoliosis follow-up that was missed. Marla nearly collapsed with relief. She can stay? She can stay with us? Yes, Dr. Kendrick said, but understand this is conditional. Any further incidents, any signs of inadequate supervision or care, and we'll revisit the placement. Elsie's welfare is our priority. We understand, Vance said, his voice hoarse. Thank you. Thank you for not breaking up our family. There's one more thing, Detective Martinez said. She held up Elsie's journal. I'd like to keep this as part of our file, but I also think you should read it, really read it, all the way through. Because every page shows a little girl who loved you so much, she was willing to hurt herself to make you proud. That's beautiful and heartbreaking at the same time. Don't waste that second chance. As the investigators prepared to leave, Elsie looked up at Uncle Vance. Can I still see the car? Is it finished? Vance looked at the restored Mustang, gleaming in the garage light. Yeah, sweetheart, it's finished. And it's beautiful. You did an amazing job. Can we show Aunt Marla? Marla walked slowly toward the car, her hand trailing along the perfect cherry red paint. She peered through the windows at the restored interior. She saw the engine compartment, spotless and complete. And then she broke down completely, sobbing against the hood. Claire would have loved this, she whispered. My sister would have been so proud to see her car like this, so proud of Elsie for helping restore it. Vance wrapped his arms around his wife. I'm sorry. I'm sorry I put Elsie at risk. I'm sorry I wasn't more careful. We both made mistakes, Marla said. I forgot about her scoliosis. I didn't make that follow-up appointment. I was so lost in my own grief that I didn't see what was happening right in front of me. Elsie joined the embrace, the three of them standing together beside the restored car, holding each other and crying. We're going to do better, Marla said firmly. All of us. We're going to pay attention. We're going to communicate. We're going to make sure nothing like this ever happens again. 3 weeks later, Elsie sat in the office of Dr. Raymond Booth, the pediatric orthopedist, who was finally addressing her scoliosis. The x-rays on the light board showed her spine's curvature clearly. The good news, Dr. Booth said, is that the scoliosis is mild and hasn't progressed significantly since her last x-ray 2 years ago. The bad news is that the muscle strain and inflammation aggravated the condition and caused additional complications. He pointed to the images. See here? The muscles on one side of her spine were compensating for the curve. When those muscles became inflamed and damaged from the work in the garage, it created an imbalance that intensified her pain. That's why sitting became so unbearable. The inflamed muscles couldn't support her spine properly in a seated position. Will she need surgery? Marla asked, gripping Vance's hand tightly. No, not at this point. But she will need physical therapy, regular monitoring, and possibly a brace to wear during high-activity periods. The muscle damage is healing well, but we need to ensure the scoliosis doesn't worsen as she grows. He turned to Elsie with a kind smile. Young lady, you're going to be just fine, but you need to promise me something. If something hurts, if something feels wrong, you speak up immediately. Your body is trying to tell you important things. You need to listen. Elsie nodded solemnly. I promise. I learned my lesson. Back at school, Mrs. Brennan had transformed the incident into a teachable moment for her entire class. She organized a special assembly about body autonomy, listening to pain signals, and the importance of speaking up when something feels wrong. What happened to Elsie could happen to any of us, Mrs. Brennan told her fourth graders. Sometimes we want to be brave, or tough, or helpful, and we ignore signs that our body is getting hurt. But being truly brave means speaking up when something is wrong, even if it means disappointing someone or stopping something fun. The students listened intently, many of them looking at Elsie with new respect and understanding. During recess, several classmates approached her. I'm sorry we thought you were being weird, Cody, the freckled boy said. We didn't know you were really hurting. It's okay, Elsie said. I didn't really explain it well. The car you helped build is so cool though, another girl said. My dad showed me pictures. Someone posted about it in a local car restoration group online. Indeed, word had spread about the remarkable restoration project and the complicated circumstances surrounding it. Local news had picked up the story, not focusing on the investigation, but on the healing power of the project and the lessons learned about child safety. A local automotive training school reached out to the Holloways, offering to sponsor a safer, supervised program where Elsie could continue learning about car mechanics in an age-appropriate environment with proper equipment and oversight. "Would you want to do that?" Vance asked Elsie one evening as they sat together in the living room, the Mustang now parked in their driveway, fully registered and running beautifully. "Maybe," Elsie said thoughtfully, "but only if we do shorter sessions, and I have to promise to speak up if anything hurts." "Deal," Vance said, ruffling her hair. The social worker assigned to their case, Monica Reeves, had become a regular presence in their home over the past weeks, but her visits had gradually shifted from investigatory to supportive. She connected the family with resources, checked on Elsie's physical therapy progress, and helped them develop better communication strategies. "You've made remarkable progress," Monica told them during her final scheduled visit. "Elsie's medical care is being properly managed. You're both taking the parenting classes seriously, and most importantly, I can see that you've all learned to really listen to each other." She closed her file. "I'm recommending that we close this case. You'll remain on our radar for another 3 months. Just standard follow-up, but I don't have any concerns about Elsie's safety or welfare." Marla cried with relief. Vance thanked Monica profusely, and Elsie, sitting carefully on a cushioned chair with proper lumbar support, smiled genuinely for the first time in weeks. That Saturday, the Holloway family invited Mrs. Brennan, Principal Donovan, and Nurse Chin to their home for a small gathering. It was Marla's birthday, the occasion the car restoration had been intended to celebrate. When Mrs. Brennan arrived and saw the cherry-red Mustang gleaming in the driveway, she gasped, "Elsie, you helped build this?" "Restore it," Elsie corrected proudly. "We didn't build it from scratch. We brought it back to life." Marla stood beside her sister's car, running her hand along the smooth paint. "You know what's strange?" she said softly. "When I first saw this car restored, I cried because it reminded me of everything I'd lost: my sister, my brother-in-law, the life we'd had before the accident. But now, when I look at it, I see something different. I see resilience. I see love. I see a little girl who hurt herself trying to give me a gift. I see a husband who made mistakes but whose heart was in the right place. I see a family that almost broke but chose to heal instead." She turned to face the small group gathered in her driveway. What happened these past few weeks was terrifying. The investigations, the accusations, the fear that we might lose Elsie, it was the worst time of our lives since the accident. But it also taught us something crucial. It taught us that love isn't enough. You also need communication, attention, awareness, and the willingness to admit when you're wrong. Vance wrapped his arm around his wife's shoulders. "I thought I was being a good guardian by teaching Elsie skills and giving her a project to focus on, but I wasn't paying enough attention to her well-being. I got so focused on the destination, the finished car, that I didn't notice the journey was hurting her." He looked at Elsie with tears in his eyes. "And I'm sorry for that. I'm sorry I made you feel like you couldn't tell me you were in pain. I'm sorry I didn't create an environment where you felt safe speaking up." "I'm sorry too," Elsie said. "I should have told you my back hurt. I should have trusted that you'd understand." Mrs. Brennan stepped forward. "If there's one thing I hope comes from this experience, it's that we all become better at recognizing when children are in distress, even when they're trying hard to hide it. As educators, as caregivers, as community members, we have to look beyond the surface. We have to pay attention to the small signs, the subtle changes, the things that don't quite add up." She smiled at Elsie. "And we have to teach children like Elsie that their health and safety are always more important than being helpful or brave or perfect." Principal Donovan nodded. "We're implementing new protocols at school based on what we learned from this situation. We're training all staff to better recognize signs of physical strain and overexertion, not just abuse. We're also starting a program to teach students about body awareness and self-advocacy." As the afternoon wore on, the group moved inside for cake and coffee. The conversation shifted to lighter topics: school events, upcoming holidays, Elsie's physical therapy progress, plans for summer vacation. But before the gathering ended, Vance pulled out one more surprise. He handed Marla a framed photograph of the Mustang, with Elsie standing beside it, smiling broadly, covered in grease stains but radiating joy. "This was taken the day before everything fell apart," Vance said quietly. "Before we knew about her back pain, before the investigations, before all the heartache." I want you to have it, not just as a reminder of the car, but as a reminder that good intentions matter, even when the execution is flawed. We tried to do something beautiful for you. We made mistakes, serious mistakes, but the love behind it was real. Marla clutched the photograph to her chest. It's perfect. You're both perfect. Our family is perfect, not because we don't make mistakes, but because we're learning to do better. As the guests prepared to leave, Elsie walked Mrs. Brennan to her car. The teacher who had first sounded the alarm, who had potentially saved Elsie from even greater injury by recognizing something was wrong. Mrs. Brennan, Elsie said quietly, thank you for caring enough to be worried about me. I know I was mad at first, but you were just trying to keep me safe. Mrs. Brennan knelt down to Elsie's eye level. Sweetheart, that's my job. Not just to teach you math and reading, but to make sure you're healthy and safe and cared for. I will never apologize for being cautious when it comes to my students' welfare. I understand that now, Elsie said. And I promise, if anything ever feels wrong again, I'll speak up right away. I won't keep secrets that could hurt me. That's all I could ever ask, Mrs. Brennan said, pulling the girl into a gentle hug. Later that night, as Elsie lay in her bed, now equipped with a special orthopedic pillow and mattress topper to support her healing back, she reflected on everything that had happened. The excitement of the restoration project, the pain she'd hidden, the fear when everything came crashing down, and finally, the healing and growth that had emerged from the crisis. She thought about her mother, whose car had become both a source of connection and conflict. She wondered what her mom would think about everything that had happened. And somehow, she felt certain her mother would be proud, not proud that Elsie had gotten hurt, but proud that she had learned from it. Proud that their family had chosen honesty over secrets, growth over defensiveness, healing over blame. Downstairs, Marla and Vance sat together on the couch, the house quiet around them. Do you think she'll be okay? Marla asked softly. Really okay? I think she'll be better than okay, Vance replied. She's strong, she's smart, and she's learned a lesson that some people never learn, that it's okay to be vulnerable. It's okay to admit when something is wrong. It's okay to ask for help. He took his wife's hand. And we've learned something too. We've learned that raising a child isn't about grand gestures or surprise gifts or teaching them impressive skills. It's about paying attention. It's about really seeing them. It's about creating space for them to be honest about their struggles. Marla leaned her head on his shoulder. Claire would have handled this better than we did. Maybe, Vance said. Or maybe she would have made different mistakes. None of us are perfect parents. We're all just doing the best we can with the knowledge and awareness we have. What matters is that when we realize we've made a mistake, we own it, we learn from it, and we do better. They sat in comfortable silence for a while, listening to the old house settle around them. Outside, the restored Mustang sat in the driveway, gleaming under the streetlight, a symbol of love, loss, mistakes, and ultimately, redemption. The journey had been painful, complicated, and terrifying, but they had survived it together, and that was what mattered most. Elsie Crawford fell asleep that night with a smile on her face, her back finally beginning to heal, her family stronger than ever, and her future full of possibility. Because sometimes the most powerful stories aren't about people who never make mistakes. They're about people who make terrible mistakes and find the courage to face them, learn from them, and grow beyond them. And that's the kind of story worth telling. Thank you so much for watching this story. If it touched your heart, if it made you think about the importance of listening to children and recognizing when love needs to be balanced with wisdom, please give this video a like. Subscribe to our channel for more powerful true stories that remind us of our shared humanity stories, about families who struggle and survive, about mistakes that teach us invaluable lessons, and about the resilience of the human spirit. And please, tell us in the comments, where are you watching from? New York, Los Angeles, Texas, London? We love knowing that our stories reach people all around the world, bringing us together through shared experiences and emotions. Most importantly, if you're a parent, guardian, teacher, or anyone who works with children, remember Elsie's story. Remember that children will push themselves beyond their limits to please the adults they love. Remember that good intentions aren't enough. We must also pay attention, enforce boundaries, and create environments where children feel safe admitting when something is wrong. Take care of yourselves and each other. Until next time, keep listening, keep learning, and keep loving with wisdom and awareness.